If I could go back 12 years to talk to myself as that first time mom who was struggling in so many ways, these are the 5 things that I would tell her.
Hi, I'm Jessica Jackson, and this is the new way to thrive in motherhood by leaning into who you are, what you love, your unique family situation, and personal mission to create a life that you actually want to live. I want to invite you to join me in saying no to the life of the exhausted supermom, burnout, victim thinking, being pulled in so many directions, suffering through survival mode, or being lost in motherhood, and say yes to building strong families and moving forward on our greatest goals in order to create a fulfilling life that we are excited to wake up to each day and become a soaring mother. This is the Thriving in Motherhood podcast.
One of my biggest struggles when I had my one little baby was just the sheer exhaustion that comes from not sleeping well. It's long days with you and a baby, so there's not a lot to distract you if you're just at home. And the nights are also long, and depending on what phase the baby's in, from the newborn waking up constantly, doesn't know days and nights yet, to then you have those brain spurts at like 4 months and it all gets confused. And if you don't know about napping your baby like I didn't, then they're going to scream for hours at night because they're sleep deprived and overtired. And anyway, it just feels like the thing that I kept thinking all of those years, or that those early years, was just like the Marines get more sleep than I do. Like, this is so hard, and it is hard. But what I would tell myself then, knowing what I know now, is yes, this is temporary, and also there's lots of ways to manage nights to help it go a little bit better. So, for example, if I can sleep better the first half of the night, I would ask my husband, who's a night owl, to hang out with my baby. Or or vice versa. Maybe you sleep better in the morning, you need to sleep in. Can you sleep in shifts? We do a little bit more shift sleeping now, 5 kids in, than we did with that first child. Also, if I can tell that I'm starting to spiral because my thoughts are just out of control and I am so tired I can't think straight, or I'm starting to panic, or the anxiety's ramping up, I put on an audiobook. And I'm really intentional with the type of audiobooks that I listen to. I want no self-help, and it can't be a fiction book, because then I will want to keep listening instead of sleeping. So this time around, I just finished listening to Empire of Pain. Very well written, very compelling when I'm listening to it, but also I can totally turn it off and it's not a problem. I've also listened to The Story of the Wright Brothers, or The Boys in the Boat, or, just a lot of like historical nonfiction that's written really well with a good narrator. And I just pop that in, and it helps me both turn off the panic and also be able to fall back asleep fairly quickly when it's time. So there's that. Also, I was just talking with another mom who also just had her 4th baby, but 10, 11 year span between the oldest and youngest. And she's just been watching movies when she nurses her baby at night. Again, it's the way to keep her brain active in the right direction and not in anxiety spiraling. All right, the second area that I struggled was just that the days, like I said, were long, and just sitting inside, staring at your walls, staring at your baby, not very fun. I felt like my anxiety and just the overwhelm of having this person staring at me all the time and crying a lot was a lot for me, a lot for them. And I just needed to learn over 12 years to go outside. Going outside is incredible. It helps calm your nervous system, especially if you're walking during that time. It helps distract the baby. In fact, when I was reading Hunt, Gather, Parent a few years ago, this is actually something that is done in other cultures very intentionally. Like when you have an upset child, you just take them outside, because being outside really does help regulate everybody, you and your baby or your children. It's also a great way to reset a bad day. Like when things feel like it's not going well, you just go outside, and it just snaps everybody out of whatever funk they're in for whatever the reason. So it might require bundling up, it might require layers, it might require, a whole lot of things. But getting outside is a cure-all for, I feel like, 80% of my stressors in motherhood. The third thing I would tell myself, I noticed in my early years that when my husband would come home, I would just say all of the things that did not go well that day. It was just like unloading of this didn't go well, and this was bad, and this was hard, and on and on and on. And it's still very easy to fall into that trap of just that downloading of everything that went wrong. And part of that is just our brains are wired to look at the negativity. It's wired to look at the problems. You add some sleep deprivation to that. It's like hyper negative mode. But the thing that I've realized, and then not only at night, but during the day, it just is like rehearsing in my head all of the things that are not going well, all the reasons why my life is hard, all the reasons why I don't have help or things aren't the way I want them to be. It's so easy to do that. And what I've realized since then is a hard moment doesn't mean a bad day. Right? Like if you start to realize when you have kids with massive meltdowns, yeah, it might last 5 minutes. Sometimes it lasts for 45 minutes. You really might spend an hour rocking a screaming baby to sleep. But that was just 1 hour. There's 24 in a day. Hard moments don't equal bad days. I can allow myself to move on. And especially when you pair it with the, okay, this was really hard. Let's go outside. Let's reset. We can still have a good day. 12 years later, my hard moments with the amount of people I have in my house as a homeschooling mom at the ages and stages we're at are a lot bigger and a lot more extreme than it was when I just had that one baby. However, that still principle is practiced constantly. And it's really liberating and freeing to not just be carrying all of this weight and baggage around all day long. To be able to learn that skill of letting things go, of starting fresh, of letting yourself have good moments too in those hard days. And so just learning to pay attention to and that self-awareness, right? That idea of like, what are you telling your husband at night? That's just a self-awareness trick to start to become more alert to the thoughts that you're having in your brain, to what you are focusing on. And there's a lot of things that you can do with that so that you are focusing on those good things as well. In fact, in the Surviving to Thriving Toolkit, I've got dozens and dozens and dozens of tips, skills, resources, practices for you to try to help you enjoy the good of the day and make tomorrow a little bit better too. It's acknowledging like, yeah, there's hard things and yes, we can make those things better, but also what are the skills that I need to enjoy things right now? Because for a long time in my motherhood, that was a mystery to me. I did not know how to feel joy when things weren't ideal. That was really, really hard. And there's a lot that can be done, actually. So you can check out the Surviving to Thriving Toolkit if that's something that you are in need of right now. Now, the fourth thing that I would talk about is maybe a pairing with this. But after I had 3 kids, I'd been through some really hard stuff with my physical health, with people, loved ones dying, intense grief, moving further and further and further away from my family. My husband finishing, going through master's, PhD, postdoc, getting a job, like all of this perfect storm. And my mental health was totally in the ground by this point. And I went and got some tools and resources, meeting with some therapists. And it was just this light bulb moment of, wow, I was making life so much harder than it needed to be. So what I would tell myself is very kindly and very gently, is there a chance that you're making life harder than it needs to be? ? And this goes back to the Surviving and Thriving Toolkit, okay? Essentially, there's 5 phases along the path from surviving to thriving. And I would tell myself this, I would teach her, there's 5 phases. And it's really important to note those 5 phases there because it shows you that you're not going to be surviving forever. It's not surviving and then thriving. It's a process, 5 clear steps along the path to get from surviving to thriving. This is really important because we know that each phase in itself is short and temporary, and you're going to move along. Life will change, and there is hope. But always, you need to have 3 pillars in place. Scope, a vision for what you want your days to look like, your life to look like. Structure, those systems and habits in place to make things easy to do that you want to be doing. And soul, where you're taking care of your mental, emotional, spiritual, physical health, taking care of you. When any one of those pillars is off, it feels like surviving, no matter where you are on those 5 phases. Now, how you fulfill those pillars is going to look different along each one of those 5 phases. But When you're making life harder than it needs to be, it's often because that soul pillar is off. And dialing it even further, for me, it was just my thoughts. Yeah, there were a lot of physical things that I needed to do. Yes, there are so many skills to learn. Yes, there's like not a lot of shortchanging that can happen when it comes to going through hard experiences and you need to face them. But by just learning to change how I was viewing the world, my perception, my paradigm, life instantly got easier. And as I developed the skill of shifting that paradigm, it got easier and easier. Now, this comes from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is where I first learned this concept, and then started praying, like, God, please help me do this. The classic story from that book is there was a man on the subway, and he had all these kids. They were running around. They were wild and crazy. And the other guy in the bus was getting really agitated with how horrible of a parent this guy was, that he wasn't controlling his children, that he didn't have higher expectations for them. And when he went to go talk to the father about these out of control children, the father looked up and just said, I'm so sorry. Their mother just died and I don't know what to do. And I don't think they know how to handle it either. And all of a sudden, that man's compassion changed instantly. And, went from frustration, anger, judging to being compassionate, wanting to help. Right. And so when I was making life harder than it needed to be, I was looking at it from the wrong angle. I had the wrong map. And once I just switched my map, things became so much easier. So with the soul pillar, there is so much that can be done, but oftentimes when you feel like you're surviving, you're like, I can't do anymore. You're not necessarily supposed to. It can just be easier by how you're thinking about things. So that is the 4th thing that I would tell myself. Now, the 5th and final thing that I would tell myself, in those early years when I was overwhelmed, when I felt like I couldn't keep up, when I had all the little kids and it was so frustrating, I felt like everyone was telling me, if you declutter more, then it will be easy and you won't be stressed and you'll have all of these time to play with your kids. And what they failed to tell me, and what I did not understand until recently, well, I don't mean recently, closer to 12 years than one of motherhood, was you cannot declutter yourself out of cleaning. You cannot declutter yourself out of feeding people. You cannot declutter yourself out of having to do routines and have habits. Decluttering is only the first of 5 steps when it comes to creating a household that runs smoothly. It's important. It does make it easier to do the things you want to do, but you will not declutter yourself out of responsibilities. They're still going to be there. And I think for so long, I just kept getting rid of stuff and getting rid of stuff and getting rid of stuff and still in a messy house and still not sure why and still really frustrated and had this perception that I wouldn't have to develop skills and habits to keep the household running, that it would just declutter it away to simplicity. And instead, realizing that no, there's always going to be routines. There's always going to have to be habits. There's always going to have to be resetting and cleaning and doing and making, and embracing that way earlier along, instead of falling for this trap that a lot of the, marketing is happening from these wonderful decluttering people that do teach out the helpful skills. I kind of was like, I'm never going to get there. No, you're not, because that's not real. So the sooner I could just accept the fact that taking care of our space is essential and it's part of life. You cannot get out of it. You can make it maybe less, easier to vacuum the floor if there's not stuff all over it, but you're still going to have to vacuum the floor. And so once I stopped resisting that, a lot of that suffering goes away. You're like, oh, I just have to do this thing. Now I don't have to prolong it or hide from it, or, it just cuts out the drama in your brain. So I would tell that to myself too. So just to recap, the 5 things that I would tell myself is sleep deprivation is temporary and there's a lot of ways to manage it to help your anxiety. So you maybe can't change the baby's sleep, but there's things you can do to help manage the situation better. 2, getting outside just makes everything better 90% of the time. 3, a hard moment doesn't mean you're having a bad day. You can still have a great day with hard moments in it. 4, there's a chance you're making it harder than it needs to be. And if you can just switch your paradigm, a lot of that suffering can go away. And 5, you cannot declutter yourself out of cleaning. Still gonna have to do it. Might as well accept it. Enjoy the process. There you go. So if you want more help, I would love to meet with you in my Surviving to Thriving Toolkit. This is a program I developed to really guide you along every phase of the path. And instead of being like, I know you're surviving, quick, let's get you to thriving. It's like, no, let me help you in survival mode with being in survival mode. Or let me help you in reentry with being in reentry. Let me help you in normalizing with being in normalizing. This is a very gentle, supportive thing all along the path to get all three pillars in place. And you can learn more in the link in the description below.
Where you are planted, watch the blossoms grow.